And just to kind of give you some reference points here, it's about 80 miles or 130 kilometers south of Charlotte and about 40 miles or 65 kilometers east of Columbia.
And it looks to me like, from the aerials, it looks to me like it's actually like part of a river course. Maybe
it really is. It is just part of a giant river course is the best way to describe it.
Or it might be a backwater of a river or something like that. But it's not like a big square or round thing. It sort of snakes around like
it's not like a giant Louisiana swamp or something like that.
No, it's not that huge.
No, not at all. It's actually not that big, all things considered. We're going to be talking about a cryptid. And as always with cryptids, there are going to be variations upon variations upon variations of the story. So I found a narrative, and we're just going to go with that narrative. You will see variances all over the internet, so just be aware. I don't know which one is right. We just grabbed one and ran with it.
Yeah.
So,
a story, not a lizard.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you don't know how I do my research.
Yeah, good point.
Lots of dead little lizards in Devin's apartment.
No, pets. Come on.
Our story starts in the fall of 1987 when George Holloman Jr. was riding his bike near Skateboard Swamp. According to George, he was thirsty, so he stopped at a small creek to get a drink of water.
And oh, by the way, this was around midnight, correct? I say the one that I read about this, it was late at night, like around midnight.
It was in the evening. I have seen variations of George's story, so I'm not going to commit to a time. But George said that he was thirsty, so he stopped for a drink. He might also have wanted to have a cigarette, depending on the version that you read.
And I gotta say, by the way, George, it's a little late, I know, but you shouldn't drink out of the creek because even though it looks clean and clear and refreshing, well, probably somebody lives upstream.
You know, there's a reason I didn't put that in my script, because I knew he would go straight for that little public service announcement.
I was going to bring up Cryptosporidium and Giardia, but whatever.
I'm just saying, dude.
It's important.
So, he stops for a drink, and reportedly, George said he felt like he was being watched, and he looked around, and on the other side of the road, he saw a green-colored stump that didn't look quite right. So
a green-colored stump?
Yeah. So he said that he had decided that he was going to go over and take a look when the stump moved and then stood up. And what he saw was a creature that was over 7 feet tall. It had green skin and horns or spikes, depending on the version, going down the length of its back. And just a few minutes later, a car drove by, causing the creature's eyes to glow red. And at that point, apparently the car was enough to startle the creature that it turned around and walked away from George and into the swamp.
How did it walk?
On 2 feet. On 2 legs.
So like
it walked
a
like a
humanoid.
person, upright like a human would.
So had George brought extra underwear?
I do not know.
Oh.
Because really, that's the end of George. I mean,
George does not actually appear. He does not appear in a lot of the accounts of this.
No, he's one of the earliest accounts. Or he's the first. If you take this in chronological order, he's the first one. But after that, he does kind of just disappear.
Actually, George was lucky too. He kind of caught the critter in a good mood.
Based on the next story that we've got, you're absolutely right.
Either that, or there's something about cars that sets this guy off.
There may be. There's a song about it that really says that. But we are going to move forward in time again to a story that was told by 17-year-old Christopher Davis. Christopher Davis was driving home from work on the 29th of June, 1988, so we're a year forward.
And this is the most well-known.
Most well-known, most reported on version of the story. It was about 2 in the morning, and he was driving home from work, and he blew a tire near Skateboard Swamp. He stopped and he changed the flat, but as he was putting everything back into the car, back into the trunk of his car, he said he heard a thumping sound behind him, and when he turned around, he saw the lizard man of Skateboard Swamp, which he didn't know that's what it was at the time.
Nobody knew about it at that time. But I think George the bicyclist hadn't said anything at this time.
He had not.
Yeah.
But, so Christopher sees this thing running towards him, and not surprisingly, he jumps into his car and tries to flee.
After a quick underwear change.
He said that he jumped into his car and he shut the door and he locked the door, and the thing went for the handle. At that point, he wanted out of there, so he turned on the car and he hit the gas and he drove away. And he said that it started to chase him, and then eventually it jumped onto his car, onto the roof of his vehicle, and he could see its fingers through the glass over the roof of the car.
So Lizard Boy or Lizard Guy was on top of the car. Yeah.
Yeah,
Man.
supposedly he was doing 40 miles an hour when Lizard Man was able to climb upon his car. I'm guessing that Christopher must have been then doing some evasive driving, swerving back and forth, and must have at some point managed to dump the Lizard Man off of the car, because when he got home, he didn't have Lizard Man on his vehicle, but he did tell his parents what had happened. And his car did have some damage. There were scratches on the roof, and the driver's side mirror was banged up. And Chris's dad, yes.
I'm sorry. I'm just thinking how this sounds like a really convenient cover-up for him having mashed his car up a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
We'll deal with this. We'll deal with that. We're not in theories yet.
I figure, yeah.
So Christopher's dad, prompted by later reports of damage to vehicles, makes his son come forward and tell his story. And he doesn't tell his story for 2 weeks. It's a full 2 weeks later before Christopher's story comes out. When he goes to the cops, and you can see footage of him, on local news telling his story, but when he tells the cops what happened, here's what his statement is. He says, and I quote, "I looked back and saw something running across the field towards me. It was about 25 yards away, and I saw red glowing eyes. I ran into the car, and as I locked it, the thing grabbed the door handle. I could see him from the neck down, the 3 big fingers, long black nails, and green rough skin. It was strong and angry. I looked at my mirror and saw a blur of green running. I could see his toes, and then he jumped on the roof of my car. I thought I heard a grunt, and then I could see his fingers through the front windshield, where they curled around on the roof. I sped up and swerved to shake the creature off." End quote. And as one of you observed before we started Christopher's story, his is the most widely reported and the widely known version of the story, or the initial story of the Lizard Man of Skateboard Swamp.
Yeah.
It's partially, as Joe was talking about, we hear about him instead of Holloman because Holloman didn't come forward. It wasn't until this story and several others happened that Holloman came forward. I think that might be why people don't give him as much credit as maybe he's due. I don't know.
Yeah, I can totally understand why he didn't say anything to anybody.
Yeah.
Because, they think you're nuts. And, of course, I can totally understand why people would think, well, Holloman just wants a little attention, and he's sort of piggybacking on everybody else. It could have been that, too.
Exactly. I had said when we were talking about Christopher's dad having him come forward that there were other reports that had prompted him to do so. Well, one of the events that had prompted him to make his son come forward took place on the 14th of July of 1988. There was a couple named Tom and Mary Way, and they lived in Bishopville, South Carolina, which is about 10 plus miles from the swamp.
It actually depends from the center of the swamp.
Yeah, it depends on where that's
towards the northern end of the swamp. It's actually closer,
Yeah, so that's why I rounded it as about 10 plus miles, just give or take.
Yeah, just depending on where in the swamp the critter was.
That morning, they were getting ready to leave the house, and Tom went outside while Mary was busy doing I don't know what in the house. But he came back in, and he told her to come outside and look at their Dodge minivan.
Yeah, the swamp man had keyed their car.
No.
No? He didn't key their car?
No.
Oh, what did he do?
The hood, the front of the hood was all scratched up and parts of it were pulled off. There were holes all along the front edge of the hood, like teeth mark size holes. The wheel well of the driver's side fender had suffered the same fate as the front of the hood. It was tore up and it had holes and scratches all over it. The molding had been torn off as well. The hood ornament was gone and the antenna was bent. And reportedly, though I've never seen anything really concrete on this, reportedly some of the wires from the engine had been pulled out. I've never seen anything where somebody said, yeah, it's right here's those wires, unlike with the footage of the van where they show the parts and pieces that were chewed off. So
yeah,
I don't know.
It's hard to say. I mean, it's impossible to do that unless you open the hood, at least partially. So who knows?
Now, on the interviews that they've given, they say that there were tufts of hair and blood and footprints around the van, and that they had those taken in for testing. and casts were supposedly made.
The cops tested them, or these people?
The cops supposedly took them in for testing, but I have never heard anything about them, and the only image that I've ever seen that maybe looked like blood on the hood of the van also looked like it could have been dried paint. So I don't know, but there's definitely the hood is definitely chewed up, and the wheel well is definitely chewed up. I mean, when they looked at it, somebody's like, well, it's obviously that an animal has been chewing on the molding of your vehicle. What kind of animal? Well, obviously a lizard.
Apparently. What else would do that?
Yeah. They do love metal, it's true.
They do.
Not a house cat.
From that point forward, there's a lot of stories of the Lizard Man during that year or so.
It wasn't even a year. It was like a summer, like a couple of months over summer, right?
No, there
were some more, but it seems like the bulk of them were in a fairly short period, in like the summer of '88.
Well, yeah, there was some in the summer, then some in the winter, some in the. It was about a year that there was reports coming in. Now, the damage to vehicles really only happened during the summer because there were people who were parking around Skateboard Swamp and coming back to their car and finding it all scratched up and punctured. But that only really happened during that summer from about July forward. But the Lizard Man continued to be reported. There were footprints found around these vehicles, and casts were taken of it. And you always see it reported as, and the feet were 14 inches long, which sounds big in theory until you think about the fact that I wear a size 9 boot, and my size 9 boot, when you slap a ruler next to it, is 12 inches long. So they're not actually that huge of feet. They're big if they're from a critter like that.
Not that much bigger than my feet, really.
But they're not gigantically, insanely huge, is my point.
Could have been your average NBA player.
Could have been.
Yeah.
Could have been.
Could have been anything, yeah. Now, the media went really, really crazy with the Lizard Man. They had a lot of fun with him, and they were reporting on him all over for a while. But as we talked about, things kind of died down, and then 2 years later, a woman named Bertha Blythers said that she and her children were driving near Skateboard Swamp when a huge figure lunged at the car from out of nowhere. And then after that, there were sporadic reports, but, you know, like I said, things had kind of tapered off from what they had been in the summer of '88. People were still reporting seeing the creature. Occasionally cars were being scratched up and blamed on the Lizard Man. And just so we kind of get an idea, the reports are usually the same. They're very, very similar to one another. They always report a creature that is somewhere between 7 to 8 feet tall. They always say that the skin is green, greenish brown, brownish colored, like there's this whole green to brown spectrum that you see it described in.
Well, some people also said it was like kind of furry too.
You do occasionally see that.
And brownish fur.
Always has 3 fingers and 3 toes.
Which I have a big problem with.
But that's a big staple of this story. I think a lot of people might actually be familiar with the Lizard Man of Skateboard Swamp and not realize it, and that is because of a report that was made back in August of 2015. There was a woman who said she saw the Lizard Man of Skateboard Swamp while she was stepping out of the back door of her church, and that she took a picture of it with her cell phone, and that picture was picked up by, I would say, a very, very reputable news source, the Daily Mail.
Our favorite.
Yeah.
Our favorite. And if you look at this image, this thing is buff. This lizard is buff.
He's really rocked out.
I mean, Marvel and DC don't draw that kind of definition on their characters. Like, this thing is just bulky and...
He looks like the Incredible Hulk with a tail. But,
does.
But even the Mail made fun of him.
Yeah, I mean, everybody did. But there was also a video that came out right after that of somebody who said that they saw a lizard man creature from a distance, moving around in the swamp.
Yeah, I've seen
and
that
if you
video.
watch that video, it's just a blurry video of somebody way far away. And is it human? Is it a creature? Like, there's no way to tell.
It really is. It looks like it's probably humanoid, but as far as it being a lizard man, you can't even tell how big it is or small or whatever. You
Yeah,
really can't.
it's a little suspicious. So,
Just a little.
just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Little bit.
So that, in a nutshell, that's the Lizard Man of Skateboard Swamp. The locals love him. They think he's great. There's songs about him. There's T-shirts and mugs and hats. I actually got to get one of those. But there's not a whole lot other than that stuff back in 2015. There's really not been any really good reputable sightings. The video is always crappy, or you can tell they're really staged videos. I've watched some of them that look like somebody had gotten a hold of a knockoff of the Creature, the Black Lagoon costume, and were walking around in the dark. It's on shaky ground.
Swampy, mushy ground.
You could say that.
Yeah.
I think real quick, we should probably watch the video.
Yeah.
Just to see what this guy looks like. So while we're watching that, let's take a quick break and then we'll go to theories.
Okay.
All right. Now it's time for listener mail. We got an email here from Bob in Esto, California. Dear Team Sideways, I would really like it if you would take at least 60 seconds to talk about your sponsor, Blue Apron. I find them really fascinating. Please say something about them. Well, Bob, that's a good question. And I got to tell you, I have a lot to say about Blue Apron, and all of it's good, of course. Now home cooking is available for all of us, thanks to them, because before you had to go to the store and spend hours, literally hours, shopping around for all these little esoteric things like, butter and milk, things you'd never heard of, in order to put together a nice home-cooked meal. And now they just send that stuff straight to your door, and it's already measured out for you and everything. And you can cook a really good meal really easily, and they're saying like 40 minutes, which, for me would be like more like 3 hours, the rate I'm going now. With Blue Apron, you can prepare delicious, really memorable meals for yourself. Let me list some of the meals here that are available this March. We've got 2 more weeks left. There's salmon piccata with orzo and broccoli, pork chops with miso butter and bok choy and marinated apple. So check out this week's menu. Get your first 3 meals, that's 3 meals, free, with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/thinking. And you'll love how good it feels and tastes to become this incredible home chef that you never thought you could be. So don't wait. That's blueapron.com/thinking.
Dude, that was so real. I'm telling you, it was the real deal.
I gotta go change my underwear. Excuse me for a moment. Let's take a break.
The subtitle of this episode is Joe, have to change the underwear.
That's right.
Constantly today.
Joe's obsession with underwear.
Yeah.
Are they uncomfortable today, sir? I mean,
Yeah.
Are you okay? Do we really need to pause so you can change them?
That's the great thing about these mysteries is they're so scary. It gives me a great excuse to change my underwear, which I
Yeah.
rarely do.
Just wish he'd wash them.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, let's go into
Texas.
theories. Theory number
Yeah.
1 is that the Lizard Man of Skateboard Swamp is real.
No.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
Nope. According to the internet, a lot of people believe that the Lizard Man could be real. And
Apparently, something like 20% of the population of America also think that the moon landing is fake. So,
and a larger
excuse
portion
me?
believe in Bigfoot. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that people believe in, and
Yeah.
but Bigfoot is real.
well,
perhaps.
let's get back to the Lizard Man,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
and then we'll talk about Choopy later.
Okay.
So let's explore this a bit, and I know that you are probably gonna have to do the same thing as I, which is set aside the disbelief because of the fact that you would think that something this big couldn't have gone undetected for this long. But let's just set it aside.
Yeah, I mean, they find like giant whales that have been living in freshwater seas all the time.
They have found new species out there, although usually they're in the middle of the ocean 2 miles down.
Or in the middle of nowhere where
Yeah.
nobody is. I just saw the thing the other day where they found a boa constrictor that they thought had been extinct for 50 or 60 years. And they're like, what? These things are here?
I'm just waiting for them to find the dodo.
It's out there.
It's out there.
Yeah.
I
They're going to
believe.
find the dodo and then it's immediately going to walk into a fan blade.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so let's put aside our disbelief and listen to this. It's real theory.
Okay, so-
however bunk it may be.
So if you think about it, South Carolina, It's not the most densely populated state in the Union. It's the 24th most populated as of the 2013 census. And it's a decently sized state.
So it's half populated.
Yes. Wait, no. And Skateboard Swamp is part of a tributary of the Petey River. And if you look at the whole area, as Joe talked about earlier on the map, it's not like it's a big square swamp. Like, it follows a lot of waterways and courses. And it really ranges over a pretty decent area before eventually dumping out into the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, it's not totally fettered water.
Right.
And actually, it would be a nice little highway if you were the sort of critter that was one of these mysterious Bigfoot-like creatures that wants to avoid detection. It's a nice little highway to transit from point A to point B, because you're not going to have a lot of people wandering around inside the swamp.
Yeah, if you're shy and it's a small population, it just naturally stays small. You could see theoretically how something living in that very specific
Microecology or something.
Yeah, that's a very specific environment could theoretically go undetected.
And for the record, we aren't talking like they came up from Florida through the Atlantic Ocean. We're talking just this one specific little area.
Yes, this is not Florida Man Strikes.
Great, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, they're definitely, they wouldn't be a transplant. They would have had to have been there for a while. They would have,
yeah, and also like the problem of them being both freshwater and saltwater would be an issue as well for me.
Well, so as far as I can tell, Lizard Man isn't necessarily like, a swimming lizard, as in it's part-time. You'd think it was a crocodile if you saw it in the water until it stood up.
No, it's more man than lizard.
Yes, It is very humanoid.
Not much of a swimmer.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the accounts vary on the look of its face. Like we talked about, it's earlier it's got the red eyes, but the accounts vary from person to person as to what its body shape is, but it's always humanoid. It's just that 3 toes and the 3 fingers are one of the common defining characteristics. After that, it's all over the map.
Yeah, it should be noted, I don't know, maybe you mentioned it, not everybody has seen the tail, which doesn't mean that he doesn't have one, but not every witness reported him having a tail.
It's very true. Not everybody says that. So either it's a rather small, stumpy tail, or it doesn't have one.
Or it could have been the angle. They just saw him from the front and didn't see the tail, maybe. I don't know, but
there is the weird thing about the difficulty I have with this theory of it being real is there are no reptiles that are known to be or even appear to be humanoid. Even the big ones, you think about like gators or the Komodo dragon, like those things they will stand on 2 legs to reach up to grab food, but they're not mobile in that fashion. They don't
walk around that way, no.
Right, they don't get around that way. So it's a little weird that suddenly we've got something that is human proportion in terms of torso and legs and arms, but is a lizard. That's the weird thing, is that we don't see this evolutionarily anywhere else.
No, you see things like the Velociraptor, which was standing on their hind legs, but they're not humanoid shaped, though.
No. Right, and they were
got
dinosaurs.
2 legs and 2 arms, and they were dinos.
And maybe it's something like that is some kind of weird holdover, like the turtle. It's still a dinosaur, but...
Well, so one thing that's also interesting is, and I asked this specifically to be able to talk about this, is they keep saying it's got 3 toes or fingers, right?
3 toes,
and that
3 fingers and a thumb.
That's very rare in the reptile world. Most reptiles have 5 fingers and toes. So, even like crocodiles, chameleons have the like weird pinchy 3 things. But lizards have 5. It's really rare to find a reptile that's got 3.
Well, actually, this one has
weird.
4. If you see the picture that was taken in 2015, he's got 3 fingers, but he's also what might be a 4th finger, but looks like actually an opposable thumb.
I'm sorry, my mistake.
Yeah, so
from
4.
That
even 4.
Very legitimate picture.
Exactly. Yeah.
My mistake, but still, even 4 versus 3 versus 5.
Yeah, it is a little strange.
It's weird. weird.
But actually, it's not unheard of if you watch The Simpsons. They have 3 fingers.
That's true.
Yeah,
The
there you
hard-hitting documentary of The Simpsons.
Yes, exactly.
Futurama also.
Yeah, they have 3. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. That just bothers me a lot.
That does. Well, and also I've seen I've seen a photograph of the plaster cast that was taken of the
Of the
footprint.
foot.
And it's you can see the heel on the ball. Mm-hmm. It looks more like it was meant to be a human rather than but we'll just say the most of the foot was okay. But then it's got 4 toes on it.
There are 3.
Are there just 3?
There's
I
just
thought there
3.
were 4.
It's just 3.
Okay.
It's that white cast, but they look like they're wires with balls on the end were used to create the impression. That's the way it looked like to me.
The toes to me looked like they'd used 2 large rocks to make the heel on the ball, and then basically use like sticks. Like 'cause the toes are remarkably cylindrical.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
Devin's showing me a picture of another set of plaster casts. So there's one that I looked at that were even different from that. And
Yeah.
and they were
Yeah, there's and see that's and here's the thing. Every cast of if we're going to get into there's some problems with this being a reel. Every one of the casts that you see is different.
Yeah.
Like the feet are always different, and whereas one, it looks like the toes are just slapped on top. The next one, they look like they're dug in, but like they're pitched into the ground. Like it's really, really, really inconsistent. Which if this was supposed to be a real critter, it should look somewhat the same.
No, they could have been a family, some adults, some kids. I mean, and of course, footprints are going to differ depending on if you're, say, walking or tiptoeing or running. I mean, they're going to look a lot different.
I get that, but there's some general issues in terms of there's
But
not even
still.
foot shape in some of them.
And to me, the one that I saw that had the toes that looked like they were made from sticks, they were cylindrical. I'd never seen toes that looked like that. Ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this whole thing could just be a product of genetic engineering and manipulation, and maybe that's what it is this is something from the Isle of Dr. Moreau, and we just don't get it.
Well, yeah. I mean, is there like a large corporation and anywhere nearby that is conducting hideous experiments? And that
You
sort of
should,
thing?
Joe. I'm ashamed of you. You should know better. There would be no way that we would know that. It'd be some secret organization being billed as, I don't know, a gas provider or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Some
Home security?
corporation,
Home security. No, it's usually like a gas facility or like a
Telephone
power
company.
plant or a telephone company.
Somebody has a reason to draw huge amounts of electricity and fuels. Yeah.
But they've got a huge underground lab. Yeah,
Yep.
okay, that's probably what it was.
But I also haven't heard that the lizard man loves Eggos, so I don't think he's probably.
You don't think he is?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good reason.
All right.
Let's move on to our next theory, which is Lizard Man, a total fake.
Yeah.
Could be.
Total fake. So this
Maybe.
this theory is that, according to the theory, that this thing is totally bupkis, and there's some things about it that make me think that it could be. There's a lot of little towns around this country that have strange creatures that reside near them. And those strange creatures seem to be one of the things that are economically keeping them afloat through the sales of t-shirts, hats, coffee mugs, and any other paraphernalia that happens to have said critter plastered on it.
But also tourism.
Well, that's exactly it. You're selling those things, you're drawing people in.
And you're drawing in just the kind of people you want to draw in, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
But,
I'm not saying that this is done intentionally. Like, let's take Christopher, for example, Christopher Davis. I think that he may have believed that he saw something,
Sure.
and then others took it and ran with it and then saw what a friggin' gold mine it was, and that's why then people start adding to the story, and there's copycats. I mean, there was a guy who was caught putting on a rubber lizard man costume in '88. Like, it blatantly spoofing the whole thing.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you? That's what I'd do.
Yeah.
I don't even know that if you know the answer to this, but was anybody actually living in the swamp?
I know that there are residences in the area, but I don't know about actually inside of the swamp. I couldn't answer that.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody could. I mean, that's the part of this
It's living in
country
a
where
shack.
there are probably some people who have lived there for generations
And are actually living in
and
swamp
are
on houses
swamp
on stilts.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe those people wanted to like scare everybody else away and keep them out of the swamp.
Not to
Get out of my swamp.
Yeah, and then it actually kind of backfired on them, because what happened is it generated all this interest, and next thing you know, there's like hundreds of hunters like going through the swamp, like trying to track down and hunt and shoot the swamp man. And so all their privacy they wanted, because they were probably growing pot or something, and all the privacy that they wanted, well, it just went away entirely. And so it's no wonder that the lizard man went away too, because they thought, oh crap, this is totally backfired on us. So.
Yeah. I guess regarding Christopher, though, I maintain that, that's something I would have done when I was 17. If I had been, like, driving a little too fast on a backcountry road, popped a tire, and run off the road and damaged my car, I'd replace the tire, come up with a really convincing story about an alien mutant dude who chased me.
That's not the kind of story that I would.
I would also not make up a story like that, but I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if it just happened that he did some damage to his car and was trying to cover it up.
Yeah.
Maybe if he was drunk or stoned or something like that, and went home, he could have been like, you know what, this is the best idea ever. My parents will definitely buy this. And at first they were like, no, but then other reports came out.
What is amazing to me is that Lizard Man, if indeed it's a hoax and it is all stems from Christopher's story, it is amazing to me that Lizard Man became Lizard Man based on the drawing that he made. Because the cop said, listen, draw what you saw. And what he drew was a three-toed, three-fingered thing that looks like an alien. Well, I mean, it really does. It's got the bug eyes and the head shape. Like, it totally looks like it's a gray.
It doesn't have the tiny little alien body, though, but it's got
this was
potato.
The bodybuilder version.
No, it's actually not. His one is kind of potato shaped with a tiny little head and real spindly arms and legs. Very spindly long arms and stuff. Yeah, not athletic looking at all.
I have this great image, like this great little scene running through my head where they're like, all right, son, draw what you saw. And he draws it, and they're like, no. He's like, yeah, it looks like an alien. And they're like, nah, son, you're crazy. It could have been a lizard, but not an alien.
What color was it? Green?
It was scaly? Yeah, it was a lizard.
Okay.
And that's just where the story came from. I'm sure, I'm sorry. I'm kind of making fun of this whole thing. But.
I understand that. But this, if we're in the hoax part, there's another problem with the whole story of the Lizard Man, and that is that Christopher and subsequent people since then have said that the eyes glowed red when lights hit them.
Not surprising then.
Well, it is surprising because most creatures that have eyes that reflect light, like cats and dogs and stuff like that, it's usually a yellow or greenish. Maybe kind of a greenish or an amber, but red is not like, the glowing red eyes. Red is not a color that normally reflects.
Literally just almost hit a skunk last night and its eyes were red as it looked at me terrified.
Are you being serious?
Yeah, I'm being serious.
Did it spray you?
No, I was driving my car.
In town?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's skunks that live in my neighborhood. But, possums as well. They have little red eyes.
But they're not red. They may be amber orangish, but they're not red. And
okay.
This story makes it out to be that they were, it always says glowing red eyes.
Okay, but in fairness, if somebody were like, what color eyes were that skunk's? I would say they were glowing red. I wouldn't be like, I don't know, they were a subtle shade of amber. I'd say they were red.
Yeah. Probably.
Right? That's what I would say. I'm sorry.
That does make sense.
But I wouldn't, I know what a subtle shade of amber looks like, but, if you're scared, you say, they were red.
But, the thing is, Christopher also says he saw this thing in his taillights as he was driving away.
Well, and
which would make me think that it's the lights on the back of his car.
Yeah, that too.
Coloring it. The same thing with George. He said that, car drove by and the eyes turned red.
Taillights.
Could have been the taillights again. So, the idea that the red eyes, that's
so
what...
really, we're actually wrong about the color of this thing too, right? Because it's only been seen in red light. So what color do you think he actually is if you see like a greenish brown in red light? Color theory.
Well, let
Okay.
me just pull out my handy dandy color wheel.
You don't have one?
Not on my back pocket. No,
Me
not
neither.
today.
Sorry. Okay, so I think there's some other actually better theories than it's a hoax.
There are some other theories here.
There are
Yeah.
Believe it or not,
Yeah.
I'm actually managed to squeeze 4 theories out of this story.
Yeah, this next one is my favorite one.
So the next theory is that Lizard Man isn't a lizard. Lizard
Yeah.
Man is another animal entirely. And I spent a bit of time thinking about what George and Christopher had said they had seen, if indeed their stories are real. And the only thing that I could come up with, besides, as we talked about a little bit before, of drugs or alcohol, is a bear.
Yeah.
And they do have them in South Carolina.
They do, and I think everybody knows that bears can and will walk on their hind legs.
Especially if they're suffering from like mange or something that's affecting.
Well, the
parts
hind
of their
legs thing
paws.
it depends on the animal. But you remember Petals? There was that bear, I think it was in California, was Petals? Or I can't remember where Petals was at, but he was a bear whose front legs had been damaged in some way, and the only way he could get around was to walk on his hind legs, and he walked everywhere like he was known in the area.
Well, and there was that.
Totally getting around that way.
And there was that bear recently. It was like a really sick sun bear, and I
I
think they
saw
were
that
like, "It's a
on the web.
chupacabra."
Yes.
right.
Yeah, I remember
and
that
it
one.
and its skin looked kind of scaly because it was just like dry. And if there were a bear that had contracted something that was damaging its skin, paws included, it would be walking around and on hind legs and
Yeah.
look kind of scaly, but also